The room is dark, except for the faint blue light glowing from a screen. A thumb scrolls. A face flickers in that glow, motionless except for the micro-movements of dopamine. Tiny hits of novelty, flashes of outrage, bursts of envy, short-lived laughter. Minutes dissolve into hours, and the body is still. But inside, the mind is racing. The heart doesn't know why. The soul doesn't remember what it was looking for. We've built a world that never stops speaking to us, but somehow we've forgotten how to listen to ourselves. Notifications whisper our names like false friends. Our devices promise freedom, yet chain us to invisible rhythms of demand and reward. It's easy to think that we're choosing what to watch, what to click, what to feel. But look closer. Who is making the choice? You, or the algorithm that has learned your desires better than you ever dared to? Somewhere between curiosity and exhaustion, we lost the silence that once guided our inner life. There was a time when stillness wasn't frightening. We walked, we sat, we breathed, and thoughts emerged slowly, like clouds forming across a clear sky. Now, silence feels like withdrawal. The moment the world goes quiet, panic rises. The mind reaches for a screen the way an addict reaches for a fix, not because it's pleasurable anymore, but because emptiness feels unbearable. We call it being lazy, unmotivated, scattered, but what if it's something deeper? What if our minds have been rewired by constant stimulation, programmed to chase every flicker of novelty, until our capacity for sustained attention, the very foundation of selfhood, has been eroded? The modern world rewards reaction, not reflection. It trains us to scroll faster, decide quicker, consume endlessly. But wisdom, growth, creativity, these are born in slowness. They need space to breathe. The tragedy is that we confuse noise for knowledge. The more we consume, the less we comprehend. We drown in information but starve for meaning. We are overstimulated, yet undernourished. And in this strange imbalance, a new kind of suffering appears. Not the pain of not having enough, but the ache of having too much that means too little. You felt it. The restlessness that hums even in comfort. The inability to sit still without a distraction nearby. The subtle grief of knowing that your mind, once a vast landscape of imagination, has become a hallway lined with flashing screens. You sense something sacred has been traded away, though you can't quite name what. Philosophers once said that man's greatest strength was his capacity to direct his own consciousness. Today, that strength has been outsourced. Our attention, our most intimate resource, has become currency in a market built to exploit it. We scroll not because we're weak, but because entire industries are designed to keep us scrolling. Each click, each pause, each heartbeat is data. And that data is gold. It's tempting to think we can simply turn away, delete the apps, or set stricter limits. But the truth runs deeper. The real hijacking isn't of our time, but of our inner orientation, our sense of what is worth caring about. When every moment is competing for attention, the self fractures. We no longer ask, what is meaningful? We ask, what is next? Look around. The mind has become a battlefield of stimuli, each fighting for a piece of awareness. And somewhere inside, a quiet voice, your voice, still whispers, trying to remind you what you once were before you became so reachable, so programmable, so divided. Maybe you were once capable of getting lost in a single thought, a single book, a single conversation. Maybe you still are. But the modern world will not remind you of that. It will not invite you inward. It profits from keeping you outward, spinning, distracted, consuming. And yet there is something within you that resists. A small flicker of rebellion, the instinct to look up from the screen and feel the weight of reality again. The breath, the heartbeat, the presence that no algorithm can simulate. That flicker is the beginning of freedom. Because if your mind can be hijacked, it can also be reclaimed. If it can be wired one way, it can be rewired another. But the first step is to see the hijacking for what it truly is, not a personal failure, but a systemic seduction. Not a flaw in character, but a war for consciousness. You think you're choosing what to consume, but maybe it's your consumption that's choosing who you become. And that realization, quiet but devastating, is where the rewiring begins. We live in an age where silence has become unbearable. The moment it arrives, we reach for the nearest screen, to fill it, to kill it, to drown it. What we call connection has become a stream of fragmented attention, each fragment demanding just enough of us to distract but never enough to transform. And so, we scroll through the world, through other people's lives, through ideas, faces, jokes, tragedies, until all of it starts to blend into one endless blur. The paradox is clear. We are overstimulated and undernourished. Surrounded by information, yet starved for wisdom. Our minds are full, but our hearts are empty. Psychologically, it's simple, but devastating. Every flicker, every notification, every swipe triggers a hit of dopamine, the brain's seek and reward chemical. It's not joy. It's anticipation. The same chemical that drives addiction. The more you chase it, the less sensitive you become to it. The same content that once felt exciting becomes flat. You start needing more, faster, louder, newer. The cycle tightens. You no longer scroll because you want to. You scroll because you can't stop. The irony is that the brain's design for survival, to seek novelty, to explore the unknown, has been hijacked by algorithms. They give us the illusion of exploration without the substance of experience. And so, you chase variety endlessly, but nothing ever satisfies. It's like drinking salt water to quench your thirst. It feels like you're consuming life, but you're only consuming shadows of it. Nietzsche warned of this long before screens existed. He spoke of the human tendency to fill the void of meaning with stimulation, with distraction, with noise. When we lose our why, we drown in how much? When meaning fades, pleasure and novelty take its place. But Nietzsche also warned that this replacement creates a kind of inner poverty. He called it the last man, the one who no longer seeks greatness, only comfort, the one who confuses ease for happiness. Look around, and you'll see it everywhere, millions of glowing faces in the dark, comfortable, entertained, and quietly hollow. Carl Jung understood another layer of this, that overstimulation isn't just physical, but spiritual. When he wrote about the shadow, he meant the parts of ourselves we refuse to look at: pain, fear, emptiness, desire, grief. These emotions demand attention, silence, reflection, all the things our culture avoids. Scrolling becomes a form of denial, a psychological defense. Every new post, every new clip, is a small act of repression. We drown the voice inside us before it can speak. We escape not because we want to, but because we can't bear to stay. And yet, the more we escape, the more the shadow grows. You can suppress pain, but not erase it. It lingers beneath the surface, waiting for stillness to resurface. That's why the moment your phone dies or the Wi-Fi cuts out, you feel an unexpected panic. Not boredom, but confrontation. The mind, stripped of distraction, suddenly faces itself. Every unprocessed emotion returns. The scrolling was never about content, it was about avoidance. Alan Watts often said, "The more we try to run away from suffering, the more we suffer." This is the paradox of overstimulation. The more we chase constant pleasure, the less we feel. Because emotion, real emotion, needs contrast. Joy exists only next to sorrow. Presence exists only next to silence. By flooding the senses, we flatten the spectrum of feeling. Everything becomes muted, even happiness. We are not made numb by tragedy, but by excess. The human nervous system can only feel deeply when it's allowed to rest. When there is no pause, there is no depth. Think of music. Without silence between notes, it's just noise. The same is true for life. The silence between experiences is where emotion breathes. But our digital age has erased that silence, filling every gap with stimulation. And so, we live in a world where everything happens, and nothing matters. Viktor Frankl, a man who found meaning inside a concentration camp, wrote that meaning is the primary human motivation, not pleasure, not power. Meaning is born from engagement, from suffering, from purpose. But meaning requires space, the space to reflect, to interpret, to feel. When every moment is consumed by scrolling, there's no room for meaning to emerge. You can't hear the quiet call of purpose over the noise of constant novelty. Our emotional numbness is not a disease, it's a defense mechanism. The brain shuts down its sensitivity to protect itself from overstimulation. What feels like apathy is actually exhaustion. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are overstimulated, overexposed, and emotionally overloaded. And the tragedy is that you think you're disconnected because you're not trying hard enough, when in truth, you're disconnected because you've tried too hard to feel everything all at once. We were never designed to witness thousands of lives, tragedies, and emotions every single day. Our empathy wasn't built for this scale. When every scroll shows another war, another heartbreak, another outrage, the psyche can't hold it all. So it stops trying. It stops feeling. It numbs. Not out of coldness, but out of self-preservation. Nietzsche once wrote, "If you gaze long enough into the abyss gazes back." But today, we don't gaze into the abyss, we scroll through it. And every flick of the thumb is another step away from our own humanity. Because feeling, real feeling, requires stillness. It requires facing what's uncomfortable, the boredom, the emptiness, the ache of being human. And yet that's the very thing we're running from. Overstimulation, then, is not a modern inconvenience, it's a spiritual crisis. It's the disconnection of the soul from the body, the self from experience. You can't find meaning in a life lived entirely in fragments. You can't feel alive when you never stop to inhabit the moment you're in. The brain may crave stimulation, but the soul craves stillness. And until we learn to honor that stillness, we will remain trapped in the noise, mistaking intensity for intimacy, mistaking motion for meaning. The truth is simple, but it hurts. You are not empty. You are simply buried beneath 1,000 layers of noise. Beneath all the scrolling, the seeking, the endless waves of stimulation, there is still a pulse, faint, waiting, patient. The part of you that still wants to feel, to love, to live with depth. It hasn't died. It's just waiting for you to be quiet long enough to hear it again. Reclaiming your mind doesn't begin with cutting the world off. It begins with remembering that you still exist beyond it. Beneath the noise, beneath the endless reactions and impulses, there is still a silent center, the place where awareness lives. It's been waiting for you quietly through every scroll, every distraction, every unconscious moment. And if the world can hijack your mind, it means your mind is still yours. It can be reclaimed, rewired, reborn, not through resistance, but through remembrance. The first truth of rewiring is simple but difficult. You cannot heal what you constantly escape. The moment you turn toward yourself, truly without distraction, the chaos begins to settle. The mind, starved for stillness, doesn't know what to do with silence at first. It protests, it searches for stimulation, it panics. But if you stay with it long enough, something extraordinary happens. Beneath the storm of noise, a different kind of intelligence awakens, not analytical, not reactive, but deeply aware. The kind that sees clearly without needing to control. Alan Watts once said, "Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone." This is the essence of inner rewiring. You cannot fight overstimulation with more force, more rules, more guilt. You have to allow your consciousness to return to its natural rhythm, unforced, unhurried, alive. The modern mind is trained to chase, to strive, to fix. But real change happens when you stop trying to fix and start learning to observe. The rewiring begins not when you do more, but when you start noticing your thoughts, your cravings, your reactions. Each moment of awareness is a small act of rebellion. Viktor Frankl wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom. The digital age has all but erased that space. Everything is immediate, like comment, react, respond. No distance between what happens and how we feel about it. Reclaiming that space is the essence of rewiring. It's where consciousness breathes again. When you pause before reacting, even for a second, you step out of the machine. You stop being programmed and start becoming aware. It's not about rejecting technology or the world. It's about restoring balance, remembering that the external world should serve the internal one, not consume it. When you reclaim your awareness, the same world looks different. You can scroll without being swallowed. You can observe without being seduced. You begin to see how easily others are lost in the noise, how the collective mind hums like a hive of unconscious reaction. And instead of joining it, you start to feel something that's been missing: clarity. Rewiring your mind means redirecting attention, not away from the world, but toward the parts of yourself that the world made you forget. The ability to focus, to feel deeply, to think slowly, to be here fully. It's not glamorous. There's no instant gratification in this process. It's like rebuilding a muscle that's long been atrophied. It aches. It feels unnatural. You'll want to go back to distraction because awareness, at first, is uncomfortable. But discomfort is the sign of growth. It means your consciousness is expanding again, no longer compressed into a single stream of scrolling thoughts. Every small act of conscious attention rewires a part of your brain. The more you practice awareness, reading without checking your phone, walking without music, breathing without distraction, the more the old neural pathways of reactivity begin to fade. You start to see how many of your thoughts weren't truly yours. You start to feel again, not in the quick, sharp bursts of dopamine, but in the deep, slow pulse of being alive. That's the reward of rewiring. Depth instead of speed, meaning instead of stimulation, peace instead of noise. Carl Jung believed that the journey toward wholeness begins in the darkness, in the parts of ourselves we've abandoned or ignored. In this age, the darkness isn't just trauma or shadow, it's the silence we've grown afraid of. Rewiring requires you to enter that silence, to sit with it, to let it reveal what you've been running from. The anxiety that rises when the phone is off, the discomfort of boredom, the loneliness that surfaces when there's nothing to do, these are not enemies. They are signals from your deeper self, reminding you that awareness cannot coexist with constant escape. As you learn to inhabit silence again, the mind begins to change. The noise loses its urgency. Thoughts slow down. You begin to distinguish between desire and impulse, between what you want and what the world tells you to want. The rewired mind doesn't reject pleasure or stimulation. It simply refuses to be enslaved by it. It knows the difference between choosing and being controlled. It learns to dwell in uncertainty without immediately seeking distraction. In time, something profound happens. You begin to feel the return of agency, the quiet confidence that you can direct your awareness where you wish. You no longer wake up reacting, you begin your day creating. The same phone that once drained your attention becomes a tool again. The same noise that once overwhelmed you becomes background. The external world loses its power because your internal world has grown stronger. This is what Alan Watts meant when he said that freedom is not the absence of constraints, but the awareness of choice within them. To rewire your mind is to rediscover that awareness, to find stillness in motion, silence in chaos, depth in simplicity. You begin to notice beauty again, in small things, unoptimized things. The warmth of sunlight on your face. The rhythm of your own breathing. The taste of stillness between words. You realize that peace was never gone. It was simply buried beneath the noise. That your mind was never broken, only misdirected. That you were never powerless, only distracted. Every moment of presence is a new beginning, a subtle act of defiance against the world that profits from your unconsciousness. Your mind was never meant to be a battlefield. It was meant to be a garden. But gardens don't grow on their own. They need tending, pruning time. The weeds of distraction will always return. The noise will always call for you. But if you learn to sit with yourself, to listen deeply, to observe without judgment, you'll find something the modern world cannot offer, a sense of sovereignty that no one can hijack. And in that quiet sovereignty, you begin to understand, rewiring your mind isn't about escaping reality. It's about learning to live awake within it. It's about reclaiming the capacity to feel, to think, to choose. To be here, fully, consciously, freely. The storm outside doesn't stop. The world keeps spinning, screaming, seducing. But inside, a new rhythm takes hold. Slower, steadier, alive. You're no longer running. You're watching. You're breathing. You're remembering what it means to be human again. And in that moment, the rewiring is already complete. The world will not slow down for you. The noise will not vanish. The screens will not grow silent just because you've found your stillness. The world will keep spinning, fast, loud, hungry for attention. But the difference now is that you don't have to spin with it. You can walk through the chaos without becoming part of it. You can live awake in a world that profits from sleep. Reclaiming your mind doesn't mean you reject the modern world. It means you move through it with awareness. You no longer mistake stimulation for purpose or noise for truth. You begin to see things as they are, not as they're presented. The mind you've rewired no longer absorbs everything it sees, it chooses. You start to feel the subtle but powerful shift from being pulled by the world to being anchored within yourself. There's a moment that happens when you've been practicing awareness long enough, a kind of clarity that's quiet but unshakable. The same situations that once overwhelmed you no longer have the same hold. You scroll, but you see through the illusion. You work, but you are not consumed by performance. You connect, but you no longer depend on validation. The world doesn't change, you do. And that's enough to change your experience of it entirely. This is what philosophers like Viktor Frankl understood. Freedom is not the absence of limitation, but the ability to choose your response within it. The world can hijack your senses, your impulses, even your emotions, but it cannot take your awareness unless you hand it over. That awareness, that inner space between stimulus and response, is your last frontier of freedom. Guard it like something sacred because it is. You begin to realize that you can live amidst distraction without being distracted. You can use technology without being used by it. You can be online, connected, informed, and still untouched in the center of your being. That is not isolation, that is mastery. It's the quiet mastery of one who has remembered what matters most. Attention is life. Where you place it determines the quality of your existence. In this light, every ordinary act becomes sacred. Drinking your morning coffee without checking your phone becomes an act of rebellion. Listening to someone fully, without waiting to reply, becomes an act of love. Walking without music, eating without distraction, breathing without rush, these small, forgotten rituals of presence begin to re-enchant your world. You start to see that meaning was never lost. It was simply buried under layers of noise. Carl Jung believed that the modern man's neurosis comes from the loss of connection with his inner life. In reclaiming your mind, you restore that connection. You begin to notice how everything external mirrors something internal. The chaos of the digital world reflects the chaos of our own minds. The stillness we seek outside already lives within. When you stop blaming the world for your unrest, you begin to see that every distraction is an invitation to return to awareness, to return to yourself. It's not about perfection. You will still get lost sometimes. You'll still scroll longer than you meant to, still get caught in loops of comparison and craving. But now you notice. You catch yourself. You remember to breathe. You remember that you are not the thought, not the impulse, not the algorithm, you are the awareness watching all of it. And that remembrance, again and again, rewires you further toward presence. Over time, the world begins to feel different. Not because it's changed, but because you have. The same noise now feels like background music. The same distractions lose their pull. The same pressures no longer define your worth. You begin to live from the inside out instead of outside in. You no longer seek meaning through the endless chase for stimulation. You create meaning through conscious attention. In this way, awareness becomes a quiet revolution. It's how you reclaim sovereignty in a world built to capture it. You don't fight the system, you transcend it. You rise above the noise not by shouting louder, but by becoming silent. You become what the modern world fears most. A human being who cannot be manipulated by fear, by outrage, by distraction. A human being who sees clearly. And clarity, in a world of confusion, is power. The kind of power that doesn't need to dominate, but simply understands. The kind of power that liberates without resistance. The world will still try to hijack your mind. It's what it does. But you'll know better now. You'll recognize the pull for what it is, a whisper, not a command. You'll feel the tug of the old patterns, and instead of falling, you'll smile. Because you'll know that awareness has already broken the loop. You can look at the light of the screen not as a trap, but as a tool. You can look at the noise not as chaos, but as background. You are no longer running from yourself, you've come home. And when you sit there, late at night, the room lit again by that faint blue glow, something has changed. The light no longer owns you. You look up from the screen, take a slow breath, and feel something you hadn't in a long time: quiet. Real, unfiltered, human quiet. You realize the world may hijack your attention, but it can never own your awareness. Because awareness doesn't belong to the world. It's the one thing that has always been yours. The one place you can always return to, no matter how loud the noise becomes. So you close your eyes for a moment. The world outside hums on. But inside, there's peace. You are not disconnected, you are free. And in that freedom, you finally understand, the world may hijack your attention. But only you can surrender your awareness. And the moment you remember that, you are free.